Before we begin, I would like to tell everyone an amazing story that happened to our family this past Friday. As you know, I am sure, every year our family makes an annual pilgrimage, an annual odyssey to the Northeast. We live, of course, in Houston. It gets somewhat hot, it gets somewhat oppressive, and we like to visit our family in the Northeast. So my parents live in New York. My in-laws live in Toronto in Canada. And every year, for the past 8 years since we moved to Houston, we used to live, of course, in Israel. For the past 8 years, we've been going to the Northeast, spending time with my parents and spending time by my in-laws. The kids get to spend time with the grandparents. We've been doing now 8 years running. Now, please God, this year, and actually this week, we're planning on making that same trip that we do each summer. Now, of course, this year, it's different because we have the coronavirus, and Canada and the United States have sealed their border to everyone but citizens, and there may be a carve-out for relatives of citizens. It's a little bit unclear the exact language of the rule of the order, so it's not so clear if we'll actually be able to get in. So in the unlikely event that the United States does not annex Canada before we go visit it, we're going to have to see if we could navigate past the border guards. It's a little bit unclear. But anyhow, that is the plan. So what do you do when you want to travel, thank God, with a large family cross-country? So you got to do a lot of preparations. Now, one of the things that we did this year is we bought like a bag, like a suitcase that goes on top of the car, on top of the van, which is going to free up a lot of room so we can have more navigation room inside the car. Every seat in our minivan is, thank God, filled with a child. Of course, one of the big problems that we face is going through the country and trying to find kosher food. There's a lot of kosher food in places where there are large Jewish communities, but driving through the country, it's almost entirely bereft of kosher food. So we have to pack ahead, and we have to kind of coordinate our trip in a way that makes it possible for us to find kosher food along the way. But anyhow, we had a crisis this past week. The key to the van disappeared. Now, thank God we have two keys, but you never want to be stuck with only one key because you really need the backup, because if you lose the one key, then you're really in a bind. So we have two keys, and one of them, of course, has, all the fancy clickers, open the doors, and all that. That's the key to use, and that disappears. And all we have is the old key that just turns it on kind of manually. To lock the door, you got to turn the key, and it's a little bit less convenient. At least we have a key, but now the search begins. The whole house, combing the whole house, trying to find the key. And of course, with a bunch of little children in the house with minds of their own and devious plans, you never know who picked up the keys. If you go shopping, you're picking up a bunch of bags and groceries and all that, and you have the keys, you drop the keys, and they disappear, and one of the kids takes it and hides it or whatever, and you'll never know. It's, you got to check if you shoe. Anyhow, this past week, we've been looking for the keys all over the house. And I take a flashlight, and I'm going through every cabinet and every closet and under every bed. And I thought it maybe dropped into the shoes. So I'm checking the shoes. We cannot find these keys. So I just resign to living a life with only one key. So I go to Home Depot, and I take the key. I say, okay, could you make a copy of this key? And they say, I'm sorry, sir. If you want to copy this key, it's a special kind of key. They only do it in the dealership. I Googled it. It's a couple $100. Listen, if that's what you got to pay, we'll have to deal with it. They can't do it in Home Depot. But I'm not going to the dealership. So I say, okay, I'm going home, and I'm making one last-ditch effort to find it. I actually incentivized my kids. I said, whoever finds it, I'm giving you $5. You find it, you get $5. Now to the older kids, $5 is not enough. So I said, okay, listen, guys, don't tell the younger kids, But if one of you two oldest kids finds it, $10, not $5, $10. Any other kids, of course, they put in like their lackluster 5 seconds. Oh, I can't find it, sorry. Anyhow, Friday, I'm combing the whole house, looking for it everywhere it could conceivably be. And to no avail, we don't find it. So we're getting ready for Shabbos. It's like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5, 6 in the afternoon, getting ready for Shabbos. And suddenly I hear a shriek, a delighted shriek from the kitchen. I found it. And my wife tells me the most amazing thing. She says that as she's walking to the kitchen, she realizes that like we've looked through the entire house and we've done every conceivable effort on our part to try to find it. So she said in her head as she's walking to the kitchen, this is only in God's hands. That's the first thing that she said. That's it. We've done everything we could possibly do. It's in God's hands. That's the first thing she said as she's walking down the hallway to the kitchen. And the next thing she says is, you know what? We're going to pledge, if we find the key, to give a gift to charity. And she's walking to the kitchen and she opens a drawer. This literally happened within 5 seconds of this kind of internal conversation. Boom, the keys are right there. We assume one of the little kids maybe dropped it into like a drawer that usually, has some pots or has some containers or something like that. And she said it was unbelievable. It was like, you're not looking for it anymore. You kind of give up on it. And you have this mental exercise. You're praying basically, and you're saying, I know it's not in my hands. And you make a pledge to give some charity if you find it. And boom, with no effort, it's right there in front of you. And I quickly gathered all my kids around and I told them the story. And right away, I went online and made a donation to charity. And I said, you know what? This is such a cool story because we talk a lot about faith and we talk a lot about Torah. And no matter how much faith we actually absorb, there's always that kind of that last mile where it's really, really real. Even Noah, of course, is a tzaddik. He's called a tzaddik by the Torah. He's righteous by the Torah standards. He's definitely righteous. The Talmud says, well, his faith wasn't exactly complete. Why? Because he only went into the ark because of the waters of the flood of chapter 7 of Genesis. There was a little bit of the fact that the weather mattered to him as well. Even he, of course, an exemplar, a paragon of faith, there was still something a little bit lacking. And of course, the greatest man that ever lived, Moses, we're going to read in next week's Parsha, I believe it is, not next week, the week after, in Parshas Chukas, we're going to read how even Moses is going to be labeled with someone who has incomplete emunah. And the sages tell us that really only God can have full emunah, because only God knows God completely. And therefore, to the degree that someone does not know God, then there is a lack of emunah, a lack of faith. But this was such a nice experience to kind of have this little window into like the real world, that the Almighty, of course, is controlling everything. And as I'm looking, futilely for the key, the Almighty knows exactly where it is. And he knows that he could put a little thought in your mind, why don't you open it, why don't you open up this drawer and you'll find it in a second. But of course, he doesn't give you that thought. And you spend an hour, 2 hours looking through the halls, combing the house, you don't find it. And then you make a slight prayer, you make a slight commitment of charity, and instantly you just have it handed to you in this little platter. So I said, you know what? I'm going to share this with everyone because it's such a nice example of the Almighty actually playing a part, kind of winking at us and saying, hey, I'm still here. I'm still with you. I'm still holding your hand, and I'm still there whenever you reach out to me.